You're on doing well, so
We were doing okay. It was very early days, and I
yeah,
remember
yeah.
all the way through this process, my dad was like, "Oh God, it's not music business. It's not going to go anywhere. You're not going to do anything." And so it was like until we had a hit record,
That's right.
then it
Yeah,
was Ice on the Pop Star,
yeah.
and that syndrome, which was which was kind of sweet, really, because I guess if you do something that's successful to people from his generation, that is the thing. It's not so much what you do, it's the fact that it is successful. So suddenly I was successful in his eyes, and I'd actually made something of myself. So that was important, you know.
Mm. Yeah, no, I understand. 10cc at the beginning was a brilliant band full of ideas and creativity. What was your goal? The main goal at the early in the beginning when you guys formed the band, you, I mean, you were listening to a lot of bands at the time, and you know, why 10cc at the beginning was different than all the other bands around. Why you guys have as a success criteria or a strategy to be different and do well in life? What people form band because they wanna be like this or be like that or be different like that or be different like that. What was the kind of goal or motivation or strategy for you guys to turn
Yeah,
in a good
I don't
band?
know. It's a difficult thing to pin down, but I remember this is going back just before 10cc. I think anybody who starts making music and recording music at the very beginning of their life doing that, they naturally refer to the kind of music they consider to be good music, and they unconsciously kind of will copy that to a degree because like the Beatles were role models to us. So a lot of the early stuff we did was kind of Beatley, you know.
Yeah,
Um, so I guess part of us was saying, "Oh, we want to be the Beatles," which is ridiculous because we couldn't be the Beatles. But you find out even then, when you start recording stuff, wanting it to sound like somebody else, it doesn't because it can't. It never will. But something else will appear during that process that is you. And I think we began to sense this. But the moment where I suppose we became 10cc was after the failure of our second single, which was called Johnny Don't Do It, which again was kind of like a doo-wop pastiche, like Donna was. Donna was a number two hit. So we thought, stupidly, we should do something similar. And we did, and it didn't do anything at all. Um, but they wanted us to make an album. So we did. But we were given a very short space of time to do it, about 3 to 4 weeks, to write and record an entire album. So our critical facilities went out the window. Whereas before we'd labour over a particular song for days or weeks on end, we threw caution to the winds and we'd come up with something. And if we liked it, we'd finish it and we'd record it. And then we'd come up with something. And it kind of didn't matter how mad it was or how bizarre it was. We'd finish it and we thought, interesting, we'll record it. Because we were in a hurry and we were working off intuition
mm.
and feeling as opposed to referring to stuff that we thought was good. Does it
Yeah,
stack up against this? Is it as good as that? We weren't thinking like that. In fact, I don't think we're thinking in that way at all. We were just essentially we were recording what came out. And what actually happened during that process at the end of the weeks is that the stuff that we'd recorded didn't sound anything like anybody else. It had humor in it. It was witty. The sounds were kind of different. It had something of the stuff we liked, but it was more daring. It sort of moved into areas that other people weren't dabbling with at the time. And I think that is down to a number of factors. The main one being we weren't in London. So we didn't have a record label executive coming in every week, looking over our shoulders and saying, you can't do this, you can't do that, you need that to be shorter, you need not to have the word fuck in the chorus, and all sorts of things. We just followed our instincts. And in so doing, we came up with something that was bright and sparkling and different. And it included Rubber Bullets, which was a huge hit. But we knew we didn't know everything. We knew just enough to have confidence to do it.
And then, so you were given 3 or 4 weeks to put it together. You know, there were not management telling you this or that, but no. You guys finished, and then whoever was paying and giving you money to put to go to a studio and then spend 3 or 4 weeks putting it together. And the album obviously was very different. Sure. What you guys were doing very different. How it was well received at the time by whoever was putting the money?
I think so. I think it was Jonathan's label. London Records. I can't remember the name of the label. But yes, it for a first album from a band, it got pretty well reviewed. There was some interesting stuff on there. It was pretty crazy. And as a 4-piece unit, we were very kind of democratic. We'd do anything, you know. It wasn't, well, that's not cool enough. That needs to be bluesier. That sounds daft. Let's not do that. Because we were in a hurry, we try anything, you know. And that way of working kind of stayed with us because it provided a template, if you like, for the 4 of us to deliver what we could deliver.
And then, in a way, kind of prove a couple of things, right? That you could do it. You discover your own niche. You were not the Beatles, but you were in your own. And then 3, the 4 of you got along kind of well, I suppose. And they were the democratic group of 4 kids putting something different together. And then out of London, like you mentioned. So everything was great, I suppose, right? I mean, it
was perfect.
Yeah.
In that, I don't know, I believe that I come up with my best stuff when I don't quite know what I'm doing. When I've sort of got one foot on safe, dry ground, but I've got the other foot in a big hole.
That's right, yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to topple in or not. And it was kind of like that. We didn't know what we were doing. All we knew was that we were doing something. And it sounded interesting. And no one was saying that we couldn't do it. So off we went.
Yeah. In a way, that's in life, right? When you are a little kid, you are 4 or 5 years old, and your parent would tell you, well, don't put the finger in the electricity socket or don't play with knife in the kitchen. You kind of, the world's are your oyster. So you're full enough. You're 4, you don't know the rules of the world or the rules of engagement, and you did it. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to be innocent, and it's a beautiful thing to, not be in London and not have a manager or,
Yeah. And we supported each other. Once someone would come up with an idea, and that's great, but what if you did this?
Yeah.
That gets better. And someone added this, that's even better. And
yeah.
Hang on a minute, if we change the shape to this, it's even better stuff. It was a very creative period of time.
Yeah, absolutely, man. What do you, looking back, if you can recall, what do you consider were the high point of those, 4 albums that you work with? Looking back now, 40, 60 years ago, or 40, 50 years ago, what, if you can.
For those 4 years, for those 4 albums.
Yeah.
from a writing point of view, personally, the song I like the best was something called "Somewhere in Hollywood," which I think was on the second album, She Music.
Yeah.
But the track that we all worked on together that I think was a culmination was "I'm Not in Love." I think everyone would probably agree with me on that, because we were still being very adventurous. We were still chancing our arm, as they say, and finding new ways to express ourselves. And recording that particular track, the way we eventually ended up doing it, was a revelation, even to us, that it was possible.
Yeah.
So maybe those two tracks, somehow, I think.
Yeah. That's a masterpiece, by the way.
That's a what?
A masterpiece.
Thank you. Well, it was mental. I mean, "I'm Not in Love," we recorded it first as a cheesy bossa nova when it sounded terrible. So we were like, put it in a drawer till later. And we carried on recording other stuff for that album. I think it was the original soundtrack. But we knew there was something in it, and so we were determined to come up with a way of doing it. And we eventually pulled it out again and sat down and talked about it. And I suggested, why don't we do it all with voices? And I think I said it out of desperation, just to come up with something unusual and different to try. And everyone said, okay, how? And then Lol suggested using tape loops. So okay. And all that process took about 3 weeks to gather all the notes and all the recordings and so on and so forth, just to create the tape loops. And I think sort of going on underneath that was, we had a practical job to do. Let's get on with it. Maybe we'll come up with a better idea while we're actually doing this, but we didn't. And when it came to the crunch and we started putting all these elements together, something magical happened. And that kind of magic doesn't happen very often. It was like another light was switched on in the room. It was a moment. We knew we had something special. And the sessions for that whole track, I don't know how many sessions there were, but again, it was special because every time we added something to the recording, it made it better. There was no point where we stuck something on and it was shit, and we have to come up with something else. Everything we put on was good. And even when we took things away, it got better. It was quite extraordinary. The only problem we had was it was about 6 minutes long. But we wouldn't edit it. We refused to edit it because it was uneditable, because the chords were all going on at the same time with the voices. You couldn't put scissors in there. It was an impossibility, and it was a huge hit.
Absolutely, man. Was any pressure nowadays, or some years ago or 20 years ago, record label would put pressure on you? Well, we need to do commercial stuff. We want to play in the radio, need to be less than 4 minutes. Forget about 6 minutes song. It wasn't nothing like that back in the day, or
no, because I don't recall any, and I think that's because that most of the singles we put out turned it into hits.
Yeah.
So they probably thought, well, they know what they're doing.
They know what they're doing, right? So
we didn't, but they thought we did. But I think that maybe by then we kind of did. No, it wasn't like we didn't take direction very well, but I don't think any of the labels that we were on felt the need to coach us in any way, because there was something in our collective psyche that liked some of the commercial elements. We had a commercial element in us, even though we didn't think it was commercial. I could never pick what a hit was at all. But there was something that we had in our joint capabilities that had what was necessary, I guess.
I mean, there was a lot of magic. If Graham was not there or you weren't there, it had been different four kids arguing, and this perhaps none of this album would have been made. I mean, the fact that, I don't know, Destiny or, kids coming out of Manchester that were crazy enough, well enough, foolish enough to make something on their life, and that's what it's about, I suppose, right? So magic, in my opinion, is like music. In my opinion, is like magic. I mean, things click well together, and then the output is unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I would think of it in a slightly different way. I mean, because I know the different forms that tracks went through to get to the finished thing that you've heard, or the audience has heard, and they could have turned out differently. That verse could have said something different to the verse in the finished thing. So who knows whether that would have had any effect on the result of people hearing it. You never really know that. You can't really think about that either. That's. I mean, I'm sure people do, and I'm sure that's part of the commercial process in normal terms in bands that are guided by labels. But there are artists that had something that didn't require. I mean, Kate Bush is a supreme example of coming up with fantastic music over and over and over again that people fell in love with. So leave it alone. You don't need to water that plant. It's growing fine. And I think to a degree we were kind of a bit like that. The one thing that we didn't have was we didn't have anything going in the visual department at all. And I think when I look back on it, it didn't mean much at the time, but when I look back on it now, it's kind of strange that we didn't, because you had two art students in the band, and we never actually got to grips with that side of presentation. We always saw ourselves probably more as studio musicians who occasionally went out on tour, and we never really put any effort into creating a visual template for the performance. And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think we may have suffered for that in the long run.
Yeah, at the time, remember that bands like Genesis, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, or whatever, they were putting a lot of effort into the lighting and the design. I mean, 50% is music. We need to be good for people to pay pounds to see us, but the other 50 were having projection, the lighting system, like a lighting design. We need to be foggy a little bit and weird colors like green or red for the people drink beer and then whatever they do and then listen to good music at the same time.
Yeah, so that's right. We didn't. I remember once, I think we played somewhere and Queen was supporting us.
Wow.
Okay, they were playing support.
Wow.
And they were on first and had a fucking amazing light show.
Yeah.
And our light show was an on and off switch. It was like it was pathetic. But we didn't learn. I think there was something in our psyche that said, "Oh, we're purists, man. We don't do stuff like that," which was wrong for the kind of music that we were making.
Of course, yeah.
It was a disconnect. That's probably how it's because it was something that was inside me and Lol that we not discarded, but we put to one side. Throughout the 10cc years, we hadn't done anything of a visual nature for a good many years. We were purely sound. and songwriting and recording and playing. And so anything visual, all the visual stuff we were coming up with and ideas in our early years were somehow outside the remit of 10cc. Very bizarre. Until later.
Is there always, when the band is doing well and then you're touring, although you guys get along very well, there's fights inside the band and you want to create a different type of music and Lol want to do something different, and then you say, well, I cannot force you guys to take this band into a particular direction. And then you say, well, I want to take leave and try to do other things. It was difficult to, I suppose, I don't know, Peter Gabriel, right? When he decided to leave Genesis and say, well, I like doing Genesis, but there is another side of me that want to do something different, right? And I cannot force, I suppose, Genesis to do that. And let me take like a year off for the band, try these things out, because if I don't do it, then I will always be unhappy in my life, right? You look at yourself at the mirror and say, well, I want to try something, right? But I cannot force the band to do it. It was yourself alone was kind of thinking about something like that. I mean,
we did. We had exactly that happen to us. I mean, we were a big band by then, and we'd been touring, and we had a reputation. We had people working for us. We had a road crew. And all the trappings of a relatively successful band. But even back in the day, before 10cc, during the brief Hotlegs period, Lol and I had invented this device called a gizmo.
Right. Yep.
And we'd never really had time to test its capabilities. Not really. We'd used it on a couple of tracks in 10cc, but not much. And we'd invented this thing, and we came to a natural place where we'd stopped recording, we stopped touring, and we were twiddling our thumbs for a bit, I think. So Lol and I thought, well, maybe we can go into the studio for 3 weeks, book some time at Strawberry, and see what we can do with this thing, which is pretty much what we did. We didn't go in there with the thought of breaking the band up or anything. It was just something that, as Peter had that necessity to get it out of our systems in some way. So we did precisely that. And at the end of that period of time, we were so excited about it, we kind of wanted to carry on and do some more. But it was coming up to record a new 10cc album time. We were due to deliver a new album, if I remember correctly. And while we'd been in the studio, Eric and Graham had been writing and come up with a song or two. It was like, okay, well, let's hear what you've done, with a view to jumping back in. So we all convened at Strawberry Studios, and Graham and Eric played the song to us. That sound you can hear now in the background is the pouring rain on the roof of my studio. Can you hear it?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, I do.
I like noise, but I can't do anything about that, unfortunately.
That's right. Yeah.
So, and I forget which song it was. It was The Things We Do for Love, or it was a song like that. It was a sort of a jolly little commercial ballad. And Lol and I at the time were heavily into this sort of heavy instrumental music, orchestral music, and our heads were totally into it. And this sounded, it was like a switch had been flipped. It was like, we don't want to do this. We don't want to do this. Can we pause here and take a year off and finish this project you guys carry on. We need to do this. But for whatever reason, there was a timing. We needed to deliver a new 10cc album. We had a staff, expectations for 10cc. The timing must have been poor because everyone said, no, you can't do that. Put it on one side again and come back to it some other time. We have to go back to the main business of being 10cc again. And I think our first thought was, well, can we kind of bring this project into the band, combine it with the band in some way? No, because like, if we get cut off, it would be because there's power cut. Okay, just let you know.
Sorry, couldn't hear you.
If the power goes out, there may be a power cut.
I got you. Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
It's not me switching off. There may be a power cut.
I understand. Yeah.
Wow. So anyway, the bottom line was that we had to come to a decision, Lol Creme and I, whether we wanted to do this mad project with the Gouldman, or whether we wanted to go back to recording what we felt was very predictable music for 10cc. And I think by then, 10cc had become, we knew what 10cc was. And for me, at least, and to the same extent, the fun had gone out of it, that sense of discovering something new each time we went into the studio had evaporated to a degree. But we were getting it from the Gizmo project. So the decision that had a lot of ramifications had to be made. We had to walk, we had to bail, which is precisely what we did. And superficially, it was a completely wrong thing to do because the album, although it was a lot of fun to make, was poorly timed, it was poorly marketed, and the actual product did not fit the times at all. It came out just after punk, a new wave had become the thing. And so suddenly we were yesterday's men, whereas Eric and Graham were still having hits. And so it was like a complete and utter, not musical disaster, but commercial and business decision disaster that had us going back to the start as Godley and Creme. So it wasn't a good time. We had a great time making the album, but it was the first time for a long time that something we put out didn't have legs,
Yeah, that's the risk, I suppose, that people need to take in life, and but you need to take this risk because otherwise you couldn't look yourself in the mirror and say, well, I want to do certain things, and I'm comfortable and safe playing with this band. I get on very well with you guys. More money to be made there, but I need to gamble and try these things, right? And I suppose that's the only way to live life, that by trying things out, right? Don't be stupid, right? But don't jump out of the building to see how it's like. But be foolish enough to try different things.
We'd never played safe.
Yeah.
We'd never played safe.
Yeah.
But suddenly, I think it was suddenly there was more at stake. From the line. There was more at stake at this point.
Yeah.
In hindsight, we made the right decision. But it took a few years to find our way back to something.
Yeah. And also I think it's a few years ago a new version of Gizmotron 2. I think it was Scarly Market. Is that correct?
Well, everything we ever recorded with it was the original. It was the original piece of equipment that had been made by the Manchester College of Science and Technology. It was the test version.
Yeah.
It was manufactured by a company out in New York and Flushing. But unfortunately, again, the timing was poor. By the time they'd done all their R&D and got the thing out into the market, cheap synthesizers were becoming the thing. And the Gizmotron was a very delicate piece of equipment. It would sound like a chainsaw if it wasn't calibrated correctly, or the temperature could affect it, or the way you actually put it in the guitar case could affect it. So it wasn't an easy instrument to deal with. And so a few interesting people used it. Everyone from Jimmy Page to Susie and the Banshees to Paul McCartney, they used it, but not enough to make it a commercial product, if that makes any sense. We continue to use it every now and again when we're recording Godley and Creme stuff. But I mean, those years were difficult. Starting again was difficult.
Yeah. But you guys did okay. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, in hindsight, everybody can change the world, right? But sometimes you, as I said before, life is about taking risk, I suppose, right? So
it is about, and it's about juggling things. It's about looking at.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not about thinking at all. Again, it just felt like the right thing to do at the time.
Yeah.
So we did it, and we enjoyed doing it, and we paid the price.
Yeah.
But so doing it took us in a different direction.
Absolutely.
Thank goodness.
No, absolutely. You have said that when you were working on the Consequences album in the mid-70s, I think you were quoted to say music was about detail, refinement, and exploration. And then everything was turned upside down by the punk movement, or something along the line. Right?
I love that. It was like if we'd have been 19-year-olds and not who we were at that time, that's probably what we would have been doing. So I kind of got it. I got the vibe, and I was kind of jealous that we were stuck in this precious, expensive, detailed, beautiful orchestral world, trying to create something that wasn't going to be as valid as we thought it was going to be. But we were trapped. We were kind of like 3/4 of the way through the project. So we couldn't just walk away. We had to take it to its conclusion. But I felt that there was something stalking us, by then. And I was right. When we emerged from the studio with the finished thing, it was like we were like two Japanese soldiers that had been lost in the forest for 10 years after the Second World War. We kind of didn't know what hit us. The world changed, We were aware of it, but, not as aware as we should have been.
Wow, yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
Oh. Rolling Thunder.
Yeah. You wanna continue, or we can finish this part now and then do part 2 tomorrow? Or would you prefer?
It's up to you. I think it's going to continue like this. Let me just check the
yeah, take your time. Yeah, I will pause the recording. So go and check. Yeah. Let me continue. I did a pause. Yeah, we can continue tomorrow. There's a lot of things, very interesting stuff that we need to talk about. So
let me check the weather forecast for tomorrow.
yeah.
I think it's going to be better tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's going to be better tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, should we say the same time?
Yeah, but the same time tomorrow, that will be great.
Will you send me another link?
I will, of course I will. I'm
Okay.
enjoying myself, and
Yeah, me
hope
too.
you enjoy yourself too. And we are reviewing your whole life. I'm like a psychologist, Kevin. I ask question, over the question, and people reflect on their life, and I'm recorded. It's good stuff. So
That's fine. I'm glad I'm giving you what you need.
yeah. All right,
Okay.
great. Have a good night and a safe night, and we'll talk tomorrow.
Okay, look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.